So I had a conversation with my OG, and I thought my OG, he always preaches that, act like you got some sense and proper decorum, but he was actually rocking with it with Shannon Sharpe. Now he and Shannon are around the same age. So he was like, yeah, these young cats think they this and this and this. They don't. But one thing he did say, he said Shannon never left his seat. Now he got over, was yelling expletives, but he never left his seat. He said all the Grizzlies and everybody came over to him. I was like, okay, that's a solid point. But again, Dylan Brooks went to the bench. You still up and yelling and doing all this excellence and come see me and this and this. You don't want this. And I just thought it was a lot on Shannon's part. And if I'm being honest, I was highly disappointed in him.
Welcome to the Clear in the Air podcast with D and Q.
I'm D.
I'm Q. Hey, man, we want to talk about a situation that we think is really relevant to, I would say, men. More specifically, it's relevant to a situation that happened this past Friday. So many of us may have heard about the Shannon Sharpe situation, incident that happened at the Lakers game, right? Yo, let's just jump into it. Tell us what happened, man.
Okay, so last Friday night, the Los Angeles Lakers were playing the Memphis Grizzlies at home in LA. Shannon Sharpe, huge LeBron fan, now Laker fan. He was sitting courtside, got into it with one of the Memphis Grizzlies players, specifically Dylan Brooks, who was guarding LeBron at the time. And I believe either he fouled LeBron or something. He was going to the bench. Shannon Sharpe sat courtside, got up and said, "You too small." Dylan Brooks said, "F you." Shannon Sharpe replied, "F you." And expletives was going back and forth. Shannon stood up, was saying, "You don't want this, bring it over here." Dylan is on the bench. Now the Grizzlies come over, and it's just, from there, it was just like a big to-do. Ja Morant comes over, Ja Morant's dad, T. Morant comes over, and it was just a big brouhaha. And then Shannon was escorted into a back hallway and was allowed to return in the second half, finished up the game. Lakers came back and won. So.
Okay. One of the things that I can say, I'm a pretty mild-mannered dude. When I'm on the court, we play ball. When I'm on the court, things can change. I don't want to go into my story too much, but I'll just say this much, or ask this question. How much of that do you think was ego?
I would say the majority of it was ego. If you want a number, I would say darn near 100%. Definitely at least 90.
Right.
I think Shannon questioned Dylan Brooks' ego by saying, "You too small." As an athlete, you don't want to hear that. And then Dylan, probably touched Shannon's ego by saying, "F you." Then it just went back and forth, and Shannon, yelling expert, telling nobody they don't want none of this, bring that over here. And I think a lot of it had to do with ego. So
the reason I go there is because I feel like us as men, in areas where things don't have to escalate, they oftentimes do because of ego, because neither party wants to back down, because then that can make outsiders or even yourself feel like I'm less than a man because I back down, or I allowed somebody to talk to me slick and I didn't really handle it as a man. So I just wanted to point that out real quick. Now, you kind of went into something that made me want to ask this question, but I want to ask 1A of it.
Okay.
As a fan, do you think Shannon Sharpe was doing too much and or went too far?
Well, let me say this. I thought it was a very bad look for all parties involved. Specifically Shannon Sharpe and Dylan Brooks, two people that I like a lot. So Dylan Brooks played for my favorite team, the Ducks, in college. Shannon Sharpe is probably my favorite sports talk show media personality out there right now. So, but yeah, I just thought starting with Dylan, I just thought, he kind of has this reputation of being, I like to say chippy. He plays with a chip on his shoulder is the reason he's got to where he's at now. Right. But a lot of people may think he's borderline dirty. So I didn't think it was a good look for him. But Shannon Sharpe, I thought it was definitely not a good look for several reasons. One, Shannon constantly preaches, having proper decorum, having like you got some sense, especially in the public eye, and especially as Black men. So I was thoroughly disappointed with him. And I just he received a lot of the backlash. Okay, so let me go back. So I understand I haven't had the opportunity to sit courtside at an NBA game yet. I'm close. I've been second row, third row. I'm getting there. But when you sit at courtside and you can afford those expensive seats, there's certain things you can do within reason. One of those things is you're close to the players, you can chirp. So Shannon had the right to say what he said. Dylan went over the line by saying F you. Shannon could have said whatever he said and let it go. But again, it goes back to that ego. And another thing is disrespect. You don't want to feel like you tolerate disrespect. And one thing, Shannon, although he does preach that thing, he don't tolerate disrespect. You know what I mean? And so, I just thought, so I had a conversation with my OG, and I thought my OG, he always preaches that, act like you got some sense and proper decorum, but he was actually rocking with it with Shannon Sharpe. Now, he and Shannon are around the same age. So he was like, yeah, these young cats think they this and this and this. They don't, But one thing he did say, he said Shannon never left his seat. Now, he got over, was yelling expletives, but he never left his seat. He said all the Grizzlies and everybody came over to him. I was like, okay, that's a solid point. But again, Dylan Brooks went to the bench. You still up and yelling and doing all this excellence and come see me and this and this. You don't want this. And I just thought it was a lot on Shannon's part. And if I'm being honest, I was highly disappointed in him.
I can appreciate everything you said. We're going to get to another point a little later, but I got this question. Do you think he should have been kicked out?
If I'm torn with that, because if it was any Joe Schmo that was on the front line, on the front row, they wouldn't have been allowed to return. But because of Shannon Sharpe, he was allowed to return. It was a dust up brouhaha, but thankfully, no punches were thrown. It was no fight broke out. So I guess they decided to take him in the back hallway. Cooler heads prevailed, and so they let him come back. I don't know. If they had not let him come back, I think that would have been a sign to other people. You know what I'm saying? You can't really act up like that. But, again, he's not your average, like Dylan Brooks tried to call him a pedestrian. He's not a pedestrian. He's a 3-time Super Bowl champ, Hall of Famer, who's a huge Laker fan and a huge Bron supporter. So I see why they let him come back.
And his line of work.
His line of work.
Correct. You know what I mean? Because here it is, the same thing that you are as a fan, like you were able to participate in as a fan, could be the same game you commenting on Monday, right, which we will talk about in just a few minutes.
Right.
Which leads to, and I'll say this much, I'm not necessarily torn. I personally think he should have been, because, and the reason I say that, like you said, if it was anybody else, and now that's another thing. I feel like the NBA is getting to that point now where they're starting to get to the point to where they let somebody go and you can't come back. Now, I'll say this much. Do I think he should have been put out of the game? I think with that much ruckus and actually disturbing the game by your actions, just on that alone, yes. Now, do I think it should have been one of those situations where you're banned for life and can't come back? I don't think that. But at the same time, I'm going to tell you this, which is going to lead to the next question I ask you. I'm actually glad, even though I say that he did not get put out, which is going to lead to my next question of what do you think about how things were handled in the end?
Well, like I said, I thought it looked the worst for Shannon Sharpe, and I thought that for three reasons. So I want to say what those reasons are real quick before I talk about how it ended. One, you know, he comes off as a Bron homer, which is fine, because battling Skip every day, who is the biggest LeBron hater, it's good to kind of balance that. So I have no issues with that. But it came across like, yo, I'm willing to fight for dude, you know what I mean, and act a fool at a Lakers game on a Friday night prime time. You know what I mean? So that's one. Two, considering his age, he got a lot of backlash because it's like, bro, you 53, 54 years old, you up here trying to fight 20-year-olds. You know what I mean? And again, when you're a man of that age, you from the old school, you're not gonna tolerate disrespect. But on the other hand, it's like you always preaching having some sense, having some decorum, acting like you've been there. Shannon Sharpe was highly critical of the Chris Rock and Will Smith situation. You know what I mean? Like he was saying, one, you do this to a black man who's hosting the Oscars, and two, you do this on that stage. You know what I mean? So that was the first thing that crossed my mind when I saw that. I'm like, bro, you've been so outspoken about a lot of things. He's outspoken about AB's clownish behavior and all this stuff. You know what I mean? And now you up here on primetime TV doing the same thing. And then the third thing is like, okay, well, if y'all don't know, a couple weeks ago, a lot of people felt like, Skip disrespected him, right? And so it's like now, all right, you got all this energy at the game against these 20-year-olds, but you let your man who disrespected you right to your face on national TV slide. So it's like where all that energy was at.
Put your glasses back on.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I mean he did it twice. Shannon was disrespected by the DeMar Hamlin tweet, and then he was disrespected. He felt disrespected a few weeks before that when he was comparing himself. Skip was trying to compare him to Tom Brady and said that disrespectful comment. So, with that being said, I was intrigued to see how Shannon would respond to it. And so I was pleasantly surprised with one, he squashed it with T. Morant later on that night, which is John Morant's dad. And I thought that was a cool moment. I was glad it was, you know, made public for people to see. I was hoping that that part will be shown as much as the melee, because I think that's important to see that, yes, we can argue, have disagreements, unfortunately, but we can also come together as men, as black men, put aside our differences, squash it, give each other a pound, hug it out, you know. So I thought that was really great. And then Monday morning came and Shannon issued that apology, bro. And I thought the apology was sincere. I thought it was thorough. I thought it addressed and apologized everybody that it needed to. And he said it. He said, for the last 6 years, I get on here, I preach about responsibility and accountability. And he did not hold himself to those standards on Friday night. And so I was really glad that he did that, man. And yeah, so he apologized to Dylan Brooks, who he probably, he felt Dylan Brooks disrespected him, but he started off by apologizing to him. Well, I'm sorry. He apologized to the Lakers first and the fans at home. But in regards to Memphis, he apologized to Dylan Brooks first. So, he apologized to his family. And, I just think it was an all around good apology. A lot of people thought he might have went a little overboard. My man said he apologized to everybody but the ancestors. I was like, nah. I thought it was, yeah, right. That's hilarious. I thought it was very appropriate, man. I thought it was very sincere. And like I said, very thorough. I could tell he put some thought into it. I could tell he wasn't reading from a prompt. He wasn't reading no script. Like it came from the heart. So yeah, I'm definitely happy as to how it was resolved, how it ended.
It made me laugh, bro.
Oh, the ancestors. I laughed when we got a group chat and he texted that joint. And I was dying laughing.
um, I want to appreciate a few things that you said. And it's funny because I was thinking of this word earlier, OGs. For those who don't know what OG means, and it's funny because I was sitting on the couch earlier thinking about something and this came up. And I wanted to say, it's kind of like I rehearsed it. So you correct me if you feel like I'm wrong. OG is typically like an uncle or like a father figure, somebody who's been there, whether they're a generation ahead of you or whether they're just a few years ahead of you, but they have experiences that oftentimes cause us to look up to them.
Right.
Okay. So that's typically, you know, when somebody says an OG, what an OG is. Now, I appreciate the fact that you said, and you're highlighting that that's who you talk to, because what is Shannon Sharpe referred to as?
Oh,
Uncle Shay.
right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Uncle Shay Shay.
Right.
And so it's a cool thing to be able to say that you have one of those in your life personally. But what I also think is important is to hear their perspective.
Right.
Because look at it, you got the different generations. You've got Dylan Brooks, I think he's younger than us. So you got Dylan Brooks, us, then an Uncle Shay or your OG.
Right.
So you're talking about three generations that are weighing in on this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I loved what I saw. And I loved what I saw because I think we're always ready to cancel people when they make a mistake, or we're always ready to call people hypocrites when they don't live out what they stand on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I think we need to remember that people are human. As men, we're going to make mistakes. I'm not clearing the air yet, but we're going to make mistakes. And what I loved about it was to see he actually took accountability. So the same thing that he talks about, he did. He just made a mistake, which caused him to take accountability. Of course, we would have preferred to see it not play out the way that it did, and he checked himself prior, but we're human. And that's why I went there about ego too, because sometimes when these other things get in the way, we forget about what's most important. All right. So here we go. Feel like we can clear the air?
Come on, bro.
All right. I think we've seen the impact of us as men when we allow things to go too far, we become too emotional. When we allow ego to step in and get in the way and cause us to be blinded or to not see clearly. Again, I'm really glad that Shannon apologized. I thought it was authentic. I agree with what you said. It was not any prompt. He wasn't reading from anything. He was articulate. And I'm going to say this part. This is the part I want us to get and hold on to. He showed us, I literally have this on my note card. He showed us as an OG the way we should be. I ain't no rapper, but that happened to rhyme. But he showed us as an OG the way things should be. So it was a beautiful thing to see how us in our generation and the younger generations oftentimes respond. We respond in that rowdy, ha type of way. So you took it too far. You got into a scuffle. Okay. It didn't escalate to a point to where, you know, any major violence took place. You realized you took it too far. You went to the man, or, you know, y'all came together. You squashed it. You deaded it before it could be any beef once you left the arena. Then you realize, oh, shoot, I'm who I am. I'm a public figure. I'm Uncle Shay Shay, the OG. On Monday, when I got that platform, I need to go make this right.
Correct.
So I don't want to hear us talking about same thing like how we did with Will Smith, whether we agree with it or not. Oh, let's cancel Will Smith. Oh, let's cancel. Don't cancel nobody. Because watch this. Last time I checked, what they say, you can't throw stones and live in a glass house.
Right. And nobody's perfect, bro.
Nobody's perfect. So, then we all cancel because we all done sin and fallen short.
Right. And that was one of the things I liked about his apology. He said that. He said, I am not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to piggyback off what you were saying, bro, like, the fact that when we was talking about ego and disrespect, I think this was a good example and a fortunate example that it didn't go farther than what it did. Like you said, it could have went outside the arena. It could have happened on the court, right? It could have happened, you know, back in the locker room or back in the hallway, right? And it could be still going on now. They could be on social media talking about each other. You could have people in Memphis wanting to get involved with it, and people in LA want to get involved with it. You know what I mean? And so I just, and this may be like way on a macro level, but we've seen it, bro. Like you want to live another day, bro. Like it's we had a basketball game, man. You talk trash, we talking trash. Okay, cool. Sit your butt down, enjoy the game, get your butt back on the court, play the game, get home to your family. You know what I mean? Like just it 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 takes more. It seems easier, but it takes more to just, push that pride and ego to the side. Because at the end of the day, what's most important, bro? Getting home safely, getting home to your family. We talked about that on several episodes. With like, man, it's a blessing to make it back home. Because when you leave your house, you don't know what's gonna happen. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, man, I'm glad it didn't go further, and I'm glad the way it was resolved. I, I love Uncle Shay, still love him. I love the fact of what he did. You know what I mean? He showed accountability, which is what he preaches all the time, as men, as black people. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, yeah, it was an unfortunate situation, but I love the way it was resolved.
Exactly. One last thing before we clear the air. Well, as we end clearing the air, we're talking about Shannon, T. Morant, OG. And what I thought was dope, because guess what? This only works if both sides come to a mutual agreement.
Right.
And what was dope was T. Morant. If you see it, they both basically show love, gave respect. One apologized, one accepted it. Maybe the other one apologized back. That was accepted. Let's dead this. So it does not have to carry on. And I feel like in our community, we can learn from this. We can learn from it. So that being said, y'all, what did you think about this from start to finish? Did you agree with what Shannon Sharpe did to kind of start and escalate this? Did you like how things were handled by Shannon Sharpe, who took full accountability? Yo, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let us know what you think. Also, we want to make sure that you are following us on all social media platforms. I want to ask that you just help us run that subscriber YouTube count up. Also, check us out on the audio experience, Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Don't forget TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are there. Check us out, follow, and subscribe. We out.
We out. Wait, before we leave, shout out to my 49ers. Won 2 playoff games. Just sent the Cowboys home. Everybody's excited about that. It's a lot of Cowboy non-fans out there that want to see them go home, glad we can help y'all with that. Hopefully we keep this run going all the way to the Super Bowl. Go Niners! Peace!